Captain's log 310726. So the other day I made a video on the three kind of major wars that are going on in the background. It was it wasn't a great video. Pretty choppy all over the place. I was driving and I realized after rewatching it, there's many other people actually, who do a really great job of analyzing and breaking down global affairs. And I don't have the time or resources to sit down and get in the nitty gritty and break down these concepts and what's going on. I can see this, read it, listen to it, understand it really well. Have a very good grasp on common sense, and I'm great at disseminating what this information means for kind of the average people and the Delta guys, which is why I have this channel, right? So I want to redo a bit of that video, but I'm not going to talk about the actual global affairs that's going on. I think that if you want to learn that stuff, you should really go and listen to people who do that full time, and get a bunch of different opinions. That's what I do. I like to listen to a bunch of different people from like totally different backgrounds and totally different expertise. Like Professor Jang, and he's doing war games and political history and that, versus like George Gammon, who's into economics, like specifically for business, and just a whole bunch of different things, and get a general idea of what's going on, and fact check as best you can with other sources, so that you kind of have a good understanding of it. But long story short, I want to do something talk about what maybe this might mean for Delta guys, your average Joe, at least in my opinion, and maybe some solutions. I don't like to talk about problems without trying to come up with some sort of solution and problem solve a little bit. I don't think it's really worth just complaining about stuff. I think it's good to, no matter what you're looking at, A, be grateful for what you have, and B, try to problem solve as best you can. If you're coming to somebody with a problem, try to come to them also with an idea of a solution. So here we go. So I wrote some stuff down. I have my computer here. I actually have and just ideas of what I have in my head of what's going on right now. So why, the grand scheme of things, we have these conflicts going on. The economy's terrible. There's a possibility that the oil reserves are running out. And if you think of like the bathtub, I had this explained, or I saw this explained, I can't remember who was explaining it, but the bathtub theory, where you have a tub, it's partly full of water, and that's your reserve. The tap is the supply, and the drain's obviously the drain. So however many barrels of oil that are used, let's say it's supposed to be up to 2.2 million a day at some point, but I don't think we're there yet. So let's say it's 1.5 or 1.7 million barrels, and that's getting drained out. If that supply gets tightened, now all of a sudden that reserve starts to drop, and I think we're probably at critical levels right now. So like that's a huge one for like, that could be a global catastrophe. That's a big deal. You have conflict as well, so that uses a lot more oil, obviously, and just general chaos in the world. that's that's one side of things. Then you have the unaccountable class trying to um, manipulate and, I don't want to say enslave, but it almost seems like that. They want to like control as much as they can the accountable class. And then there's a whole bunch of ideology, race, ideology, religion, all these things, conflicts going on, and most of that's like online, verbally, or whatever. But you look in places that maybe aren't the first world, and it's very kinetic. There's something like, I can't remember how many thousand of Christians that have been massacred already this year. Like it's something crazy. I think I wrote it down here. I think I had a note on this somewhere. Let me just see here. Yeah, I might not be able to find it. It could have just been on a website that like a stats website that I was reading. It was a lot. Like it was a very sad statistic. Uh, Unfortunately, yeah, it was a lot. It was too much, but that's what's going on. Anyways, so let's talk about the Delta guys. If you are, Delta, blue collar, whatever, the working class, basically you're the working class of the world. Delta guys tend to take the brunt of everything. So here's some reasons Delta guys get hit particularly hard. Specifically like trades guys, construction, often have to drive trucks, moving tools and material and stuff. Like whether or not it's your own personal vehicle, often it is. It's the way it is. And people can say, hey, we need more people drive small cars and whatever, but unfortunately it doesn't work for trades guys. You have to. And unless they legalize these little K trucks and stuff and make them cheap for everybody to buy, that's really the only other option. So we're here where we're at. It is what it is. They often commute long distances. Job sites can be anywhere, and they change. Like, it's not like you can move close to the office. It doesn't matter. Your job site could be 2 hours away one day, and it could be 5 minutes away the next. Again, they have to carry the tools and material. They have to buy tools and material. Tools and material have to be shipped wherever. They often tow trailers, operate machinery, heavy machinery, skid steers, cranes, forklifts, whatever. Yeah. So there's some places where Delta guys can maybe ride their bike to work, carpool, things like that in some instances, and there's others instances where they can't. There's really no getting away from, like, somebody has to bring the tools, somebody has to bring material. You're gonna have to eventually do that yourself in your own vehicle. Someday you're gonna have to, whatever. The further you get along in the trades, it is what it is. So given that, Delta Guy's vehicles are often the most expensive to operate, like trucks, heavy machinery, that kind of thing. They tend to also be vehicles that you would, work on yourself to save money, things like that. Like these aren't the most, wealthy people in the world. So they service a lot of the stuff themselves, or try to have vehicles that are easier to service, so it costs less. Obviously, an electric vehicle is not easy to service. That's you're getting into a whole nother realm. So these things end up costing a lot to operate. Um, the jobs that we do, like construction, all the Delta jobs tend to be sensitive to economic slowdowns and stuff. If you worked, um, if you were a postal delivery guy in the government, like the government post service, your job might be pretty safe for like economic slowdowns. Like the mail keeps going. The bank still needs people to work at the bank. Whatever. But if you're working at buildings and nobody's buying them, or the material's too expensive to build them, that like affects you a lot. So these things, and even if there's demand, if you can't meet the supply, like if there's no way to get the stuff to build, or there's no way to whatever run the machinery, there's nothing you can do about that. So like that starts to look like delayed projects, renovations being postponed because homeowners don't have the money, businesses trying to reduce their expenses, so like they're getting rid of what they might call the fluff, things like that. And government infrastructure, that's another big one. The government seems to have an endless amount of money, but as soon as people stop working, that tax stops flowing, so the infrastructure can eventually grind to a halt. Just in general, layoffs, things like that. That ends up happening, flows through like all of that industry, because one part might get hit, and that has a rippling effect. So another side of this is something like inflation. Inflation can hit families and Delta guys from a lot of different directions. Like you might have fuel inflation, so it costs you more to get to work, it costs you whatever. But then it might be groceries, it might be your rent or mortgage, vehicle payments, tools, whatever, like clothing, work clothing, all these things. And it hits at every direction. And again, these all have rippling effects, so that like one thing affects the next thing and affects the next thing. So Delta guys end up getting affected by this, like obviously as much or more than the regular people, or not regular people, but the other workers, office workers, etc. Delta guys are often, I don't want to say used isn't probably the word to say this, but it's the only thing I can think of. They're often used as like a financial shock absorber. And what do I mean by that? So Delta guys, you might have a family, a working class family. A Delta guy is gonna, as soon as things cost more money, is gonna start trying to work overtime. Which means they're gonna pay more taxes. They end up being the people who fix emergencies, so like infrastructure, etc. Things that were supposed to be fixed before and then got delayed in an emergency. The Delta guys end up doing that. They try to maintain the infrastructure. If there's like actual emergencies, they end up being the ones going volunteering to fix things. They're the ones who get drafted usually. for like military, or sign up. Like they're the highest levels in the military are guys from like working class families. They tend to support extended family, like their parents, their in-laws. Uh, if they get divorced, they're supporting, their bum ex-wife or ex-husband, I guess. Um, and then they have to absorb layoffs without public sympathy. Like, if you get a whole, division of road workers or whoever, laborers, whatever, get laid off, you don't really get the same amount of sympathy that like teachers would. Teachers out picketing and whatever, and they get, or whoever, nurses anyway. Um, and that's not to say that teachers and nurses can't be delta, but I'm just more so the construction industry, and that tends to be the unsung hero who ends up getting, yeah, no sympathy. And not that you need it, but it's, they're not really thought about. So, and one of the things that comes with that is you can get some isolation happening. So, um, you know, those guys tend to try to work things out themselves and problem solve and fix the issues, and they don't really talk about it. And again, they're not really thought about, so it goes unnoticed. But if you get laid off and then all of a sudden, very quickly, you can have no savings. Like, that can happen very quickly. If you don't have a community of support, like maybe you're not going to church, maybe whatever, that can be isolating. You might not have dependable friends around if you're moving for work, things like that. You might not have family nearby for the same issues. Maybe you didn't have the chance, or because these things happen so slow. Like, this has been such a long, drawn out issue that it's very easy to see how some of these working class families can run out of their emergency buffer. You think, okay, well, I'll just put money back into it when this all rolls over. Well, if it never rolls over, if it's been 5-6 years, I mean, how long has it been since before COVID? So like, these things will drain a family very quickly. So your emergency plan could be completely kaput. Nowadays, with all the different we have millions of people immigrating all over the world and things like that. You probably don't know your neighbors. They might not even be culturally similar to you. So, you don't have that like tight-knit community and bond and relationship with people around you, which, that's underestimated how important that is for people. And especially like if they're totally culturally different, then you really have nothing. There's nothing there. There's no commonality, and it's a very hard bridge to gap to like find something to build that relationship with. So those are like broad issues. Those are broad things that affect these guys, right? So like I said, solutions. Like, what can you do? Like, you might be looking at all this and it seems pretty dire. It seems like, well, like you're basically screwed, right? What do you do? Like, you lose your house, you lose whatever. Like, that stuff can happen. But there's steps. Like, there's still time. There's always some sort of time. And the second best time to do it is right now. The first best would have been 20 years ago, but you can't predict the future. So you have to do what you can, right? So the first thing you should try to do is get your finances in order. And that is like way easier said than done. We all have things going on. Like, I know this personally. I had a failed business, and if you know anything about business, it's very expensive. And failing something, I'll give you an analogy. If you play like contact sports, if you play rugby's a good example. You get beat up way worse when you fail, like when you lose, than if you win. The winning team is always like, when you're running the ball down the field and somebody's trying to tackle you, it ends up hurting the person trying to tackle you more than it does you, unless you get like blindsided. But like usually the winning team ends up really beating up the losing team, and that's how business is. If you start to lose in business, you get beat up pretty bad. So like I know some of this stuff personally, and I know like it's not easy and it's hard and you have to organize. And that's the biggest thing. It's like find, use ChatGPT, use whatever resources that you can. Like some resources are expensive, like financial planner, and then some are almost free, like some of the AI and whatever. And those are like great uses for AI. So yeah, plan, like sit down and figure out where you're at. Okay, I feel like I'm drowning, I feel like whatever. Let's see the actual data and see what the heck's actually going on, because what you can't do anything about it unless you know. And then start attacking that, like figure out whatever the plan is and be honest. Again, ChatGPT will just tell you whatever. It'll give you the data and tell you. And then usually it has a roadmap if you do it properly, and then like stick to it, start hitting the high interest debt, get rid of that, try to build your emergency fund, cash, all these things, like avoiding the debt and buying new vehicle, etc. So like take care of your finances and build like a strategy and a procedure to do that, so you don't have to worry about that stuff, because that's going to be the biggest weight on you with all this is if all this stuff's going on around you and then your personal life is just collapsing in on you, and debt and all this stuff, it's going to really take it out on you. So taking care of that is huge, and it's also like a control thing. If you're in control of your finances and that, you're kind of in control of your life. If somebody else is, they kind of control your life to an extent, and it could be the government, the bank, whoever. So that's a big thing to reduce your fragility, right? And then you can use that. You can use like that. Money is in some way power, right? You can use that to if you have to move, if you have to help a neighbor, whatever, right? It's kind of a big deal. And that's the long game, right? You have to do that throughout your life, but right now it's especially important. But you have to kind of keep those skills. The next thing is like like I talked about trades guys and stuff, right? You're using vehicles and whatever. You just try to reduce your fuel vulnerability. So there's not much you can do in certain instances, but there's other things that you can kind of plan on, and organization's a big deal. So like, let's say you have to go and run errands, or you have to pick up material. Well, you should try to line those up so that you're doing things as efficiently as possible. Maybe you have to go to the plumbing supplier, and then you have to go to Home Depot to pick something up, and you have to go to whatever. Well, instead of making individual trips, you try to combine those in an area that's close by. Be like, okay, well, I can get this from this store, I can get this from this store, and this from this store. They're all within 3 kilometers, 3 miles, whatever, and I can knock that out at this time, instead of, oh, I have to go there and then come back, do whatever, and then, oh yeah, I forgot I have to go back there. Now you're making like several trips, right? Simple things, maintaining your vehicle so that it runs more efficient, your tire pressure, blah blah blah. That's pretty, people do that anyways, right? So try to, I know like Some people will want to store fuel, which can be like a really good option. If people, like if you're on a farm, you can store a lot of fuel. If you have a shop or whatever, just make sure you're like safely doing it, obviously. But that can be a really good option. You get it when it's cheap, the prices go up, you can start using that reserve just like the countries do, right? And then when it's cheap again, start trying to fill that back up, right? Just like the exact same as a country does. Yeah. Consider whether every person in your household needs a vehicle, or if you can, if your wife works at, the clinic down the road, well, maybe you can drop her off on your way to work, or she could walk, bike, whatever, or vice versa, right? So, yeah, or live closer. But I mean, the living situation is what it is. Like, you're not gonna, especially now when houses cost so much, apartments cost so much. You're probably living where you're living for that reason. So there's not much you can do about that. Another thing, with all this chaos and uncertainty, depending what your family structure is, you should have some sort of like household preparedness. And not like, I'm not talking about like getting scared and being a prepper right away, like that kind of thing. Just like gradually, and common sense things, like things that you kind of, no matter what's going on, you kind of should have in place anyways. Like, you should kind of understand how much food and water you have available. If the power and whatever goes out, or there's an emergency, it could be any kind of emergency. It could be, we've had in Ontario, we had these massive wildfires, right? And the people had to move out from their villages up north. And people who were prepared had more time to get out, and also had more ability to take what they needed for survival, and some of their wealth or whatever, and move, right? And then others who were like scrambling, they lost everything. But it could be anything, tornado, whatever. So have drinking water, food, medications, first aid, flashlights, batteries, like that kind of simple prepping stuff, right? And use the stuff, like, don't just leave it sit, but use it when you need it and replace it. And just have a general idea of that standard operating procedure. There's like specific channels about prepping. Go look at them and like use what's practical, use what's like makes sense. You don't have to go get tactical gear. Just have stuff for yourself and maybe your community, if like people who are like-minded, because that's a big thing, right? Being around people who are like-minded, who same culture, etc., and you can support those people, right? Because that's another big thing. The next idea would be like develop useful skills. So maybe you're a plumber, right? But it would be useful for you, because you're already a hands-on guy, to also develop some mechanical skills, or mechanics skills. So like fixing your vehicle, fixing heavy equipment, so that you can save a bit of money, some time, stress. You can just get it done when everything else is falling apart around you. It's nice to know that you have the ability to take care of your own shit, right? So that's a huge one. First aid, like, I always go to the first aid courses. I always get that stuff, because I want to know that if there's something happens, for me, I'm foreman on a job site, and if one of my guys gets hurt or something happens, God forbid something happens, I want to be there to make sure that whatever that happens doesn't end in tragedy, or at least worse than it is right now. Like, I want to be able to help and to hopefully make a difference. And that can be for your family, it could be for your job site, it could be anywhere, right? Your community. It's a good thing to have, and it's important. I think it's like taking some responsibility onto yourself, some, civic duty, right? There's so many skills like cooking, cleaning, like that kind of stuff. Instead of paying for McDonald's, maybe, grill a burger or whatever. Like having food prepped as well, can save you so much money. It's also way better for your health. So if you think, if you're one of the people who maybe you buy into the idea that the food that we're eating is kind of not so good, maybe poisoning you a little bit, having the ability to cook and prep food and like maybe grow food, maybe whatever, is huge, right? Your fitness, like skills for fitness skills and stuff, living a long, healthy life will obviously help everything. If you're staying out of the hospital, you're saving money, like just that alone. Okay, the next one. This one is not talked about a lot, but support your local productions. And that's like local farms, local businesses, whatever. And support people who are in your community, whatever that community may be. So, like, the world's getting very polarized, and there's a certain group of us who are, in the past have been very open and generous with, our wealth and whatever other stuff, and like welcoming with everything. And that has now been turned against, some of these heritage populations. And there's more government control, there's more whatever, right? And if you believe in that, and if you believe in freedom and all these things, and you should find like-minded people. Maybe they're your church group, maybe they're whatever, your work friends, whatever, or your neighbors. You should try to kind of move in those neighborhoods that you want to be with. You should really try to buy things from people who are in that community that you agree with, right? So like, maybe you want to buy from a Catholic store or whatever, right? Maybe you have, maybe you're Italian and you want to buy more Italian stuff instead of buying imported whatever from, China or wherever, right? Or maybe you're Cantonese and you want to buy from the Cantonese place, right? That's the community that you agree with, right? That's gonna, like, most of these small communities are doing that anyways, but there's a group of people who are kind of have never really thought of that. And one of the reasons that is important is because if you're importing things from wherever, they might be places that don't like your people. They might want control of you. They might want whatever, and you're just giving them money. Like, especially the government. If you're buying local stuff, there's less chance that you're giving, the government more power over you, right? So you're giving them less power because you're not paying for something from like a mega corporation like Walmart, who is basically tied in somehow with the government through lobbying and other things, right? So by supporting your local community, buying from them, building relationships, trading, teaching the new generations, like that's a huge one, teaching kids, right? To build things and think like you, etc., right? Those are all huge things to support, and that last generations then. And if you care about that, then you should have a bit of civic duty in that way as well. And in saying that, like, strong communities matter. Try to build up a strong community of some sort, have friends and whatever, and be active in it. And these communities need all kinds of different people. Delta guys are like super, super, super important because you are the backbone of any community. In that's where you branch out, right? You might be a tradesman who volunteers for fire, like the fire department, right? Volunteer fire department are great options for that. You might do your CPR. You might be a nurse who does whatever, like other things, right? Or teaches people CPR, anything. Teachers, musicians, whatever. It doesn't matter. But like, build these communities, share ideas. Hopefully, like, you agree on a lot of stuff, and hopefully there's enough, diversity in there that you can kind of, that you're not just soundboard, right? That where you actually have a bunch of diverse opinions but also are morally compatible, right? That's the biggest one, being morally compatible. And in saying that, building a life around like faith and service, in hard times like this, having a strong community, for me, that's my, going to mass and seeing the people at mass, talking to the priests, having that strong Christian identity, and having, knowing, okay, well, like, if I base my life on this, I am doing the right thing. I'm doing what I believe is, morally correct, and et cetera, et cetera. And that gives you a bit of direction in life, right? And it gives you a place to also help other people. It's like it's a jumping board into the community and charity, etc. It gives you a reason to get out there and do that stuff. And like, that's preserving that is huge, and specifically like Christian communities, because there's no other community in the entire world that gives as much as that community for charity and missions to go and help people, and just benevolence in general. And I'm not saying that they're perfect. There's a lot of bad things that happen, but obviously, it's obvious in general they're good. So having strong roots for your community is huge. So how do you start this? Like, what, like, there's, actually, maybe I should do another full video on that, because this is this is kind of a big one. What I'll do, I'm gonna leave it there, and then I'll do another video about like breakdown of how to even do this, because like, starting a community is not just as simple as walking out in your community and saying hi. It kind of can be, but it's a little more complicated than that. So I'll do a whole nother video on that, but I think that's it for now, because this has gone fairly long, and I got to get moving stuff. So I think that's it for today. Delta out.